Finance favors the bold. That's what my brother Troy said as he ended my role as a partner. Just like that. 23 years of building Shepherd Capital Holdings. Gone with a cold handshake and some polished corporate lingo. I'm Colin Shepherd. 41 years old. Up until last week, I was a senior partner at the investment firm our father started out of a garage back in 1987. Troy's 39. 2 years my junior, but he's been acting like the heir apparent since before he could tie his own shoes. Dad used to say Troy had that killer instinct for high finance. Me. I was the steady one the guy clients trusted with retirement portfolios and college funds. Troy had been setting the stage for months. Once Dad declared he'd be stepping back from daily operations, Troy wasted no time. He brought in 2 external investors, revised the partnership structure, and held closed-door meetings I wasn't even informed of. The signs were obvious, but I kept doing my job. Because 2 decades of client trust doesn't vanish just because. Your younger brother gets power-hungry. The morning he summoned me into the conference room, I already knew. There he was, behind Dad's old desk, suited up in something that probably cost a month of someone's salary. The investors flanked him like hired muscle. "Colin, we need to reevaluate your position moving forward," he began. I sat in the same seat I'd once pitched my first client from 15 years earlier. The leather was smooth, worn from nervous executives who'd come through hoping we could help save their businesses or secure their family wealth for future generations. "The firm's evolving," Troy said. "We're pivoting toward aggressive investment strategies, cryptocurrency, high-yield derivatives, venture capital. This takes a certain mindset." Paused, waiting for a reaction. I gave him nothing. "You're great with conservative portfolios, Colin, but that market's fading." I let him finish his speech, hollow jargon, dressed up as vision. After 23 years, he couldn't even be straightforward. When he finally said it, my role was being eliminated, I stood up and shook his hand. "I understand," I said. "Aggression has its uses." He shook my hand, expecting a blow-up, maybe even a fight. Instead, I left the room and started making calls. What Troy didn't realize. He'd just triggered the one thing he couldn't afford, my retaliation. I guess building Shepherd Capital wasn't just my profession, it was my identity. Dad started it when I was 18, fresh out of high school, ready to prove myself. While Troy played lacrosse at a private college, I was filing paperwork, cold calling prospects, and chauffeuring Dad to meetings in our old Honda. By the time Troy joined, I already held half the client relationships. Doctors who handed me their malpractice settlements. Lawyers who let me manage their retirement savings. Legacy families from Boston whose fortunes went back centuries. These weren't gamblers. They valued stability, integrity, and patient growth. Troy never understood that. "We're leaving money on the table," he'd argue, whenever I chose a municipal bond over a risky venture. These clients could triple their portfolios in 5 years. But I knew what mattered to them. Dr. Patricia Wynn didn't want to. Triple her net worth, she wanted her retirement secured and her daughter's med school paid for. The Blackwood family? They weren't chasing rapid growth. They wanted to preserve a legacy that had endured depressions, wars, and recessions. That's where Troy and I diverged. He saw numbers. I saw people. About 6 months ago, the cracks began to widen. Troy started meeting clients without me, pitching higher-risk ventures that made my skin crawl. He'd come back raving about hedge funds and crypto plays like they were lottery tickets. If I asked for details, I got vague comments about evolution. Then came the New York investors guys with luxury watches and salesman smiles. They'd camp in our conference room, throwing around buzzwords while Troy nodded along like a disciple. Dad didn't seem sold, but he was already halfway to retirement. Troy had convinced him these guys would elevate the firm. Meanwhile, I noticed the subtle changes calls that stopped as I entered. Emails I was left off of. Contracts that only needed Troy's signature when they once needed both. So no, I wasn't. Shocked when Troy fired me? Hurt? Sure. Disappointed? Of course, but shocked, not remotely. What did surprise me, though, was how calm I felt as I walked to my truck. I sat there for nearly an hour, not wallowing but calculating. Those 23 years. of client trust weren't Shepherd Capital's. They were mine. Troy thought he'd inherited a spreadsheet of names. What he actually inherited was my legacy on. He had no idea how fragile it was. 3 months earlier, during a casual review of our partnership documents, I'd flagged a clause. It was subtle but powerful. Certain high-value clients could reallocate assets immediately in the event of management changes. Standard protection for wealthy investors. No, I hadn't read that far, neither had his flashy investors, so I pulled out my phone first call. Dr. Wynn, there have been some management changes, I told her. We should review your options. Are you leaving? She asked. I've been asked to step down, and so am I. Tell me what to do. That call took 10 minutes and ended with a $12 million commitment to my next firm. Second call, Harrison Black. Another. $15 million. By the time I got home, I'd secured $87 million in pledges from 6 families. Troy had fired me Friday afternoon. Perfect, that gave me all weekend to notify clients per the protection clauses. By Monday, the reality at Shepherd Capital would be unrecognizable. I met with lawyers that morning, submitted 6 transfer forms perfectly legal.
8.
My new firm, Shepherd Advisory Group, was already incorporated. I'd been preparing for this since the investors arrived. At 9 a.m., the calls began. Colin, what did you do? Troy demanded. I exercised client rights, I replied. You might want to study contract law. You can't just take our clients. I didn't. I offered options. They made their own decisions. Silence told me he knew he was in trouble, because the real issue wasn't legal, it was financial. Shepherd Capital earned 1.5% of managed assets annually. Losing $87 million? That was over $1.3 million gone instantly. His investors wouldn't take that lightly. By noon, Dad called. Colin, we need to talk. Troy made his position clear. This isn't Troy talking. It's me. I met him at the office. He looked tired. Troy says you stole our clients. Troy says a lot. The truths in the contracts. I laid them out. Section 12, page 4. Ironclad. You wrote this into every major contract. Everyone, you taught me to protect the clients. That's what this is. He studied the documents, something in his expression softening. Troy doesn't know about these, does he? Troy doesn't read contracts. He just signs them. You've been ready for this since the investors showed up. Then he told me the real plan. The investors wanted a full buyout eventually. Troy promised them growth he couldn't deliver. But now, he'd lost 60% of the firm's assets. So the model no longer worked. Dad offered a deal. Come back. Help rebuild, under Troy's management. I asked. No, there's an escape clause. In their agreement, if they miss benchmarks, they're out. I'll make sure they miss. I declined. It's too late. Tuesday, another call. Colin, it's Margaret Foster. We want to transfer the Petone estate $28 million. Also, we have referrals. Other families are looking to move. By Wednesday, 4 more families reached out, another $43 million Thursday. Troy's lawyers called. You've solicited clients. No. I responded to their rights under existing contracts. They backed off fast. Friday, I heard from Kelly at the office. The investors had pulled out Troy. Calling headhunters that afternoon, Dad asked to meet. The investors are gone. Troy's finished. Then Friday morning 1 week later, Troy showed up at my new office. Wrinkled suit, sunken eyes. I need those clients back. They made their own decisions. I can't keep the firm afloat. You told me finance favors aggression, I said, watching him squirm. Now you'll see how aggressive I can be. 1 month later, Shepherd Capital was listed for sale. Troy tried. But the math never worked. Without legacy clients, there was nothing left. Dad called. Troy's shutting it down. I'm sorry it ended like this. So am I said. But not for the reason you think. 6 months later, my firm managed over $130 million. Outgrown our space, added staff, and restored client confidence. Then a package came. No return address. Photo me, Troy, and Dad at a Christmas party years ago. On the back, before it all went wrong. I stared at it for a long time. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, but sometimes burning them is exactly how you find your path forward.